All right. So what we are going to do today, my objective is to create a basic custom control today. And as we saw yesterday, last session, there were two kind of templates available while creating the custom control. One was for the field type custom control, and the other one was for the data set. So today's focus is just to create the field type custom control. So when you start um, doing using a tool, first thing is you need to identify your control's location, where your control is going to be hosted. And recommendation is always to start with a blank folder. So if you already have a control created, like let's say you downloaded or you have been handed over a control from someone else. So basically what you do is you go to PCF control and then you go to that particular control and then go to the file where it has index.ts. Okay. And the control manifest file. You copy that location. Okay. And then you paste it on the control location. So I'm going to remove that and then paste it over here. And then I'm going to say reload details. I did. Something is wrong with that. It was open for a very long time. Text analytics. I have to close this. Oh, I don't think so. There's a control available over there. That's why it's not reading it. No, there you go. Sorry. So it was this folder where the PCF project is there. So you have to select the PCF project location and then paste it over here, and then it would just read the details of the control, and the control would show what the component name is, component control name is, and the namespace and the version as well. If it has a solution embedded in it, so what happens is if you go here, there's a solution file created. So sorry, there's a solution file created here, CDS project. So if it finds a CDS project underneath that, then it will also read the solution file too. This is just for an existing control, but today we are going to create a control from scratch, right? So we'll go to I forgot where I stored my sorry, I'm trying to find my folder. Okay, so this is my folder, right? This was not the folder that I wanted. Maybe I'll just use this folder and I'll create a new folder here for PCF control demo. Okay, and this would be my folder. So I'm going to paste this folder over here, and then I'm going to say new from blank. So it's going to be a new control. Now here I'm going to give my namespace and then my control name. So what my control is going to do is the idea of my control is going to be a simple text box control. And as soon as you start typing your text, it would show the number of characters that you have entered. And it will be showing the number of characters that you've entered and also the number of characters, the limit, and then it will do a countdown. So let's say you entered, the limit is supposed to be 2000. And then as soon as you start typing your text inside the text box control, then it will show 199, 198, 197. It will start counting down the number of characters left in that text box. So you know how you are typing things on Twitter, and then Twitter shows you the countdown of the number of characters that you have entered. So it's similar to that concept. Okay, so this would be my control name, and then I'm going to select my template. So it's going to be fill template. Now I don't have to do anything, and this is all the component details that I would need. I don't need anything else. And then once I have this populated, I'm going to hit the create button. Now the create button, as you can see, it shows the status here running. And what it does is it runs the pack PCF init command. Now pack PCF init command, you have to first specify the namespace. So this namespace is coming from this particular thing. And then you have the name, which is your control name, which is coming from here, right? And then you have the template, which is the field, which is coming from the template dropdown that we selected. Now once it initiates the PCF control, what it does is it does the npm install. Now npm install, when what happens is pack PCF init command goes and creates this folder structure. And then as you can see, it has this package.json file. So if you open this package.json file, so you can see that it has all these dependencies, like it installs a node, it installs this Power Apps component framework. So this is what the dependencies are. So it will go and install these dependencies first. So that is what it is doing in the control as well. So you can see that it initiated this npm install, and it is just running the npm install. Now because there are a lot of dependencies, so it's trying to install all those dependencies in the node module. So if I go back here, you can see there's a node module that got created, and then this node module is actually getting filled up right now. So if I go into node module, you can see that there are so many node modules that are getting created, and that's why it will take time. So in first initialization that you would do, and then once you do npm install is going to take little bit longer to install all the dependencies. So once it, as you can see, it installed 657 packages from 501 contributors. So it installed a lot of packages in the backend, and then that's why it will take a while. And you would see that the running status would be shown here. Once it completes running, then the status would just go away. Okay, that means it completed its running. Now once it completes its running, you can see that the version also got populated over here. Now going back to the folder, you can see that all these node modules were installed. Okay. Now,
so Danish, I have a question in this. So there are so many dependencies that are brought down by Node.js. So when we actually package the control that we build and deploy that to Dynamics, what's the usual file size that we are looking at with so many
right.
dependencies?
So I'm not gonna answer that question right now, because we're gonna look at how that file is getting created. So once we reach a point where we are gonna build, I'm gonna show you the file what it gets created, but it doesn't include all the dependencies. To answer you in brief, it will only include the dependencies that you have used in your project.
All right, sounds good. Thank
Yep.
you.
Okay. So now we have a base initial project created. Now let's go and open it in Visual Studio Code. As I said, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code because it works on a folder structure, which is pretty easier, because the extensions that we have as of today are not compatible with Visual Studio. So I click on open in Visual Studio Code. What it does is it takes you to the code directly. It opens the controls index file and the control manifest file locations. So now, as you can see, we'll go to control manifest file first. So in the control manifest file, you will see that whatever namespace you had provided came here. And then whatever name you gave to the control came here as well. And then this is the same as display name and the description. But now you don't want to change the namespace. You don't want to change the constructor because that is what you used when you initiated the control, right? But you can obviously change the display name, and display name can have space in them. Constructor or namespace may not cannot have space in them. So let's put counter
So why
and
can't we change the namespace and the name of the component? Is it because it's being referenced at other places, or
yeah,
there's some kind of
it
other?
creates this manifest type dot d dot ts. So that's where it is referenced. So it goes not here. It's referenced somewhere else. I forgot where it. Yeah, if you are changing it, then you also have to change the class name because that's where
Okay.
it is referenced.
Yeah. So as long as it's typical,
Right.
TS.
If you're changing it, then you have to change it wherever it's been referenced. If you know
Right.
where or wherever it's been referenced, you can certainly go and change it.
All right.
Okay, so display name you change, description, control, you don't need to change the control because control type is always standard. It doesn't change. So you change the display name, you change the description key. You can certainly change the version, but because we are using tool, what we have done is there's an increment version. So whenever you build, the version of the tool gets incremented automatically. So you don't have to worry about versioning. So
So
let's come back to. Hmm?
yeah, then I remember once you mentioned that if you have to export multiple controls in one solution, then you had to have all of them in the same namespace. Is that still applicable? Still the same?
That's still applicable.
Okay.
But that's only for deployment. So when we talk about deployment strategies, I'll cover that topic. Okay. Uh, okay. So coming back to this, so the control is now we have defined our control properties. Now we will go and define our actual properties over here as well. So let me. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a property called input text. So this is going to be my input text, which will be, so I have to change the attribute, like out of the box attribute, to my own custom attribute, right? So I want to capture my input text. So this what this property would define is which field do I want to bind to in CRM. So let's say I'm binding it to a description field. So this description field would the data from the description field from CRM would appear in this property so that I can use it in my control. So this is where the binding would happen if the usage type is bound. I'll show you when we actually use this control. So just remember that this property is what will be getting binded in CRM if that usage type is bound. And then so here we will say input text, and then we'll give the same for description as well. Now off type is nothing but what type of what is the data type of this particular property. Is it going to be bound to a single line text, or is it going to be bound to a multiple line text or a text area? Okay, so what's the difference between text area and multiple line text? Mostly people ask that. So text area is something that is multi-line but has a limitation to only 200 characters or something like that. I'll show you where to check those. And multi-line multiple type is where it's more than 2000, like it's 100,000 some characters. So how to check where this data types are? So you go to help and then you launch the Microsoft document. Okay, and then these are the Power Apps component framework overview, right? This is where you would see everything for Microsoft Power Apps component framework. You go to references and then you go to manifest schema references. In manifest schema references, you will go to type, And under type, you can see all the types have been mentioned over here. And what's the difference? So if you can see, there's a type for currency, date time. Date time has date time and date time. Date time and date only. Then there's decimal, enum, FP is your floating point, multiple. So multiple is for this many characters, whereas single line text area is for 4,000 character limit. So that's the difference between multiple and text area. Then the option set, all those things are available over here. Now, which attributes are not available have been mentioned over here. So lookup is not available right now. Simple, customer. I don't know why it's not aligned properly, but yeah, it's normally it was not the case before. You hardly can see these values over here. So these are all the data types that are available. Now, going back to the code. So, but what happened? What? Let's see. You want this is not the code that I wanted. So let's say you want
Danish,
that.
a question on the data types.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say if we do have different formats when it comes to a string, right? So does it accept whatever we provide and bound it to inside CE if we define it as single line of text?
So do you mean like characters, or do you mean like single line text with URL or single line text with?
Yes.
Okay, so that's where I was going with. So most of the time you don't want to bind it to a one single um, data type, right? Now, if I want to create this input text and then I'm going to do a character counter, I would want to bind this to a single line text area and multi-line text, right? So I have to bind, I want this particular control to be available on 3 different attributes. So for that, we use type groups. Okay, so this, instead of using off type, you would use off type group. This is what you would use. Now, here is where you would define, what you would do is you would first go and create a type group. So I'm just going to copy it from here because it's simpler. Okay, and then I'm going to give a name. So give a group name. So what my type group name would be, it would be text area. And I'm going to change this to single line text. And I'm going to use single line. So let's go back to that documentation. Single line text, single line text area. I'm going to copy this as well. And then I'm also going to use it on multiple. Okay. Multiple. I don't want it to work on decimal. And then I'm going to replace this with this text area. I'm going to copy this text area name, and I'm going to replace it with the of type group. So now what we are saying is this particular property can be binded on 3 different data types. Now, here is the catch. If you look at the documentation, where it doesn't say it over here, but I'll send a link to you to my video when I explained about this manifest. There's a limitation where some of the data types cannot be mixed and matched, and that's only for Canvas app. So you cannot have single line text and decimal or floating point together in one type group. It would only consider the first type group type that you have selected. So what they have done is they have grouped these types together in a way that, okay, so this is multi-line text, single line text. This would work together, but and decimal and floating point will work together. But if you combine decimal and single line, it won't work. So that's only for Canvas app. And this was like a week back. I don't know if that limitation has gone away, and I'll check and confirm, and then I'll send you the link to the videos so that you can see, and also send you the link to the page as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anish, can you explain the usage property? It says bound. What are the
Yes.
other values there?
Yes, I'm gonna come to that. So off type group and off type. Got that? Questions on off type group, or anything around data type?
I think somebody asked the question earlier. I believe that was Chaitanya. So the question was like for the text properties, there are multiple sub properties, right? Like email, URL. So it covers that broad spectrum of all the single line text and
No,
multi-line text when we do
no,
this.
it does not. So you can see here there's a single line email, single line phone, single line text area, single line ticker, single line URL.
So
It's
as long
separated
as we
out.
specify all these in the group, those would be covered. So if we
Right,
just take this type and add these to the group, we should be covered.
right. Yes, you have to add it
Okay.
in this group.
And is there a limitation, Danish, on how many types can we add it to a group?
Not that I'm aware of right now.
Okay.
Yeah. The only limitation that as I specified earlier, it's only on the Canvas app where you cannot mix match the data types. Like you cannot mix match decimal with single line or single line with date time. It only takes the first one as your data type. Okay, and
Got it.
that's only for Canvas app right now. Okay, so now moving on, we have usage. So usage has two values in it. It's bound or it's input. So bound means it will be binded to an attribute in CRM. And input means it will not be binded to it won't be bind it can be, but it doesn't necessarily have to bind to an attribute in CRM. You will get a text box where you can actually type in your free text. Why is that been used? It's been used for configuring your control in a way. Let's say you have created a control. So I created a control for text analytics, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to capture the key, right? The text analytics key. So key is something that won't be in CRM as an attribute. It would be something that is of a configuration type. So that key, uh, so for that particular property, I gave the usage as input so that it appears as a text box, a free line text box. So users can input whatever values they want. It's also used for configuring your JSON. Like you want to give a JSON format, you can use usage type as input and then provide a JSON format in it. Things like that. Then is required, and required is either true or false. Now, you can have multiple properties as well. So we are going to use multiple properties today just to show how it looks like from a configuration point. I'm going to do input type, and I'm also going to use the usage as input so you guys can see when we implement the control. So it's going to be character limit. Just to save on time, I'm going to just copy paste the display name. And then this is going to be just my text. So single line text is what I'm going to use here. And then I'm going to remove group because it's not a group, it's one single data type. And then usage will be input. And required is true. Okay. Now there's other properties called default. So if you say this is going to be my false, so I can say default is going to be my 100. I'm actually going to change this from single line text to a whole number. And I'll show you what happens when you go to input. So whole number is what I'm going to specify in the character limit, and then I'm going to default it to 100. Okay. Next is resources. We are not going to use any of the resources. We're going to keep it very simple. So now we have the control manifest defined. Now we go to index file. Okay. In the index file, as you can see, you have the constructor, which you saw on our last call. We saw constructor. Then we saw the init function that gets created, the update view, get outputs, and destroy. Okay, so these are the 4 functions that gets that comes pre-populated for you, and then a constructor along with it. So as you recall, the event execution was constructor, init, and then update view. And then whenever you invoke notify output change, then the get output gets invoked, then the update view gets invoked. Okay. So what we are going to do here is we're going to create some so UI is defined through TypeScript. So TypeScript is where we would be also defining the UI. There is no HTML or anything. So we need HTML elements to define the UI. So how do we define HTML elements? You have to define HTML elements like regular things. So let's see how you do that. So HTML elements, and then here you would write, so each and every element would be a variable in TypeScript. So let's say I want to create a div tag. So it would be, and then it's my main container. So it would be HTML div element. So this is going to be my main container's HTML div tag. Okay. Now I want a text box control, right? So private.
So Danish, there is no HTML here. You
There
cannot
is
design your component using HTML.
no, you don't.
Wow.
Well, if you're going to go with plain custom control, then the answer is no. But if you're going to use React, then you can use you can use some of the HTML, and we'll see that when we come to the React session.
So I mean, you are doing the same, right? I mean, you're defining HTML components. At these are going to be like runtime components rather than designing the page using the HTML tags.
Sorry, I don't understand your question.
Like what you are doing here is you are creating these elements which are nothing but HTML elements, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these would eventually get converted into HTML components.
Right. Yes. But those HTML components would have wrappers around it. So I'll show how it turns out to be.
Okay.
Okay. So now what as you can see, we have created the HTML elements, but the init method has context, notify output changed, and a state and a container. Now these particular variables that are passed to the init method are not available in any of the other methods except update view gets the context. Context is available in the update view, but notify output changed is not available, or state is not available, or container is not available, right? So what I normally like to do is I also normally like to assign those global variables and then just store the values. So what I normally do is I normally declare those. So I declare it for container, right? So it would be HTML. So I just have to see what this container is. It's of HTML div tag, div element. Then I'm going to declare the context. Context, you may or may not use it, but it's a good thing to declare it so you have it handy. Then notify output changed is another thing. So I'm just going to copy it over here. And then that's it. Okay, so I have the container, context, and notify output changed. I might not need the state, so I'm going to keep. I'm not going to use it. Now moving on. There's a main container, there's a text box, and then there's an output label over here. Okay, and then now we are going to define the UI. So defining the UI, because init method is going to be invoked first, we are going to define everything our UI in the init method. But before you define the UI in the init method, I want to initialize all these three variables over here. So the container is equal to container. The context is equal to context. Then the notify output changed is equal to notify output changed. Notify output changed. Now I'm going to declare my UI. Okay, so in the UI, I'm going to first create my main container, so main div tag, and then inside that div tag, I'm going to add my text box and my label. Okay, so first we are going to define the div tag. So element main container is equal to document dot create element. So I'm going to create an element. So this is like you're creating your, let's say you're creating HTML, right? So when you're creating an HTML div tag is nothing but an element. Attributes are the things that are inside the tags, right? So first what we need to do is we need to create the element, which is a tag. So once you do this, you would see all the tags that are available from HTML. So you can search for div tag. Okay. And if you give anything different, then you would see that there's an error over here. If you, because this is of type HTML div, as you can see here, HTML div, if you specify a text box, text area, it would still throw an error. That's the beauty, right? So you, because when you say create element of text area, it says that this is returning a HTML text area element, and it's not returning the div element. Div element would only be written when you're using a div tag. So that error goes away. So now you see that it's returning HTML element here. Okay, simple. And then you can give your class name. So if you want to give a class name, you can give main container dot class name is equal to, let's say, main container. And then now what we would do is we would create the text box element. Okay, so element text box is equal to document dot create element text area, and then element text box dot. Now text box will have a value. Let's say you're opening up a record that already exists in CRM. So the value would come. So CRM would already have a value. Now, whenever we load that custom control, we want to show the value that's already existing in CRM, right? So textbox would have an existing value as well. So that value. Now, how do we retrieve a value? So to retrieve a value, we have to use the context. So let current text value be. So we have to use context. So context is nothing but your this context that comes as your parameter, or you can even use this, the context. So let's use the context. So we can use it throughout the code dot parameters. Now context itself has a lot of properties, and you can see all those property details in the references. But to access the property value, parameters is all your properties is what the parameters would be. And then now here's the thing. This is showing sample property. The reason why it is showing sample property is when you created the controls generated manifest file still has this sample property over here, right? And the output is also showing the sample property. But in my manifest file, I have two input properties, input text and character limit. This manifest file is the generated file, but this only gets generated when you build that control. So let's go and fix that. Where's the error? There's an error somewhere.
The value, text box value.
So let's go and fix that. So let's go to our control and then build it. Just click on build. Now it will run the build command. So here is the build command, npm run build. And when it's running, it's building, it will give you all the status. So this is what you would see from the command prompt as well. So if you're running this query npm run build, it will execute in a similar fashion. And then you can see the status over here, and it also shows if it's failed. Now, where did it fail? You can see where it failed. So it says manifest validation, additional property default existing. Oh yeah. I think so. We need to get rid of default because we would not be using it. It checks for each and everything. Even if there is no error in your TypeScript, it will check if your TypeScript is really following all the rules. So it has this build command. PCF script has some rules, and it will check for those rules as well. So now it succeeded. It shows us status over here as succeeded as well. And go back. Now if I open the manifest file, you'll see that the inputs changed, and even my output changed. So the output is always your bound fields. See, the character limit did not come as the output in the output interface, because character limit was defined as usage type was as input and not bound. Only the properties that have usage type as bound would appear in the output. In output is what you would be sending that data back to CRM. Okay, so coming back to index file and then going here now, if I do parameters dot, I would see that I can look at both my properties. So input text dot. Now you have a lot of things you can see. You can get the attribute name, you can get the error messages, you can get formatted value, you can get the raw value. So I'm going to look at the raw value. I don't want the format value because it's a text value. So I'm going to keep it to raw. Right. So now, but the thing is, raw value can come in as empty as well. But I want my this variable to be only string. Right. I don't want it to be undefined. So if it is undefined, I want it to be an empty string. So now my current text value will always be of type string. If I remove this, and if I remove this, and if I look at here, my string value can also have undefined type, which doesn't show it, but it would throw an error. And the value would be current text value. Okay. Now, also now I want to set an attribute as well. So attribute can be set using set attribute function, and then you can set any attribute, any valid attribute. So one of the valid attribute on text box is a placeholder. Right? I'm going to give placeholder as 3 dots. How you have in CRM. Okay. Similarly, you can give the class name. Okay. And then that's it. My text box is ready.
So Danish, you have memorized these class names by doing this over and over.
Class name can be anything. There's class names are nothing. You can
No,
define
you have a CSS, right? It's coming
I
from
haven't defined the
CSS.
CSS yet. So
You haven't done it yet. You're gonna
yeah,
create it later.
yeah, you define the class names and then go and create the CSS later on. It's up to you. You can change the class names.
Okay,
I'm
I
giving
thought
I'm giving
I
random
thought as a
names.
okay, I
Uh,
thought as a tool, there are some classes that are generated eventually which you can use. So you have to
um,
define your CSS.
yeah, you have to define your own CSS. So I'm just giving random names in the class names.
Okay.
Okay. Then we are gonna define. So the other thing that I said is I'm gonna show the character, remaining characters, right? So to show the remaining characters, I've created a label, output label, which is a label element. So I'm gonna create that now. Output label is equal to document dot create element, and then it would be of type label. Okay, and then it can have a class name, which I can define it later on. I'll define the CSS later on. Okay. Now, once the UI is defined, but if you see this container is very important. The reason why it is important is because PCF control is giving you a container, and then you have to add these elements in those containers. Now you can add those elements in a way you can structure like how you would structure your HTML. So think it from the HTML perspective, right? So you would have their PCF's container, which would be the main div tag. Then you have another div tag of your own. Then inside that div tag, I'm going to add this text area. And then I'm going to add this label inside this div tag. And then this div tag will go under this container. You're picturing the HTML. Yeah. So main PCF div tag. Under PCF div tag, I'll have my own div tag. And under my own div tag, I'll have this text area and label. How do I do that? So add to containers. So I'm going to add to containers. So first thing I'm going to add is I'm going to add to my main container. I'm going to add append child. Okay. I'm going to add my text box. Then
This is exactly how you would do it in Angular, right? Append child.
right. Yes. And then once I have added my text box and output label in my main container, I want to add my main container into the PCF's container, right? So that would be the container which is coming from here, the container dot append child, and then I'm going to add my main container to this. Okay. Now, one thing that we haven't done is we haven't so we have the text box, but we haven't defined the event listener for the text box. So we won't be able to capture the output. So let's go ahead and declare the event listener. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's
Nope.
go ahead.
Looking good.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and declare the event listeners. Now, again, anything that we are doing, even event listeners, as we have done for HTML elements, event listener is also going to be your variable. So private event, and then this is going to be a text change event, right? So text change, and then event listener or event listener object. This is what we have to use whenever we are defining the events. Okay, so we're defining if it could be of two types. It could either be event listener or it could be an event listener object. So that's why we are creating this event listener object over here. And then what you have to do is you have to, now you would be writing a function, right? So let's write a function, what that function is going to do. Private functions. Okay, so my private function is gonna look something like this. So just to save time, I'm gonna copy the code. So I have my own onChange event, which takes the event as a parameter, which is nothing but my event object that I have defined over here, which we're going to use in a while. So my onChange event takes in the event as a parameter, and then this calls in the function to calculate the number of characters in the string. This particular logic is doing the count up and not count down. So there are some issues. We'll just fix those issues over here. Element text box. So what it's doing is it's taking the length of the text box That's the character count, and then it's also taking the length of the word count. Then in the output label, it's showing the character count and the word count. And then here it's calling the notify output change. So notify output changed is getting called here. So what's happening is whenever we are calling this onChange event, it would call this calculate number of characters function, and then it would do this logic. And because the output label is changing, we wanna save the data back to CRM, right? Because the text box data is changing. Because the text box data is changing, we want to send that data back to CRM. If we don't send it, it will not get saved. So I'm going to show that to you as well, what happens when you don't send the data back. Okay, so now we have this this text change event. So let's go and initiate that text change, bind it to the function. So dot bind. Oh, what happened? To on change dot bind this. So this is how you bind it. Text change this dot text change. So this dot
And
event.
I believe, like on chain, there are multiple events that could be raised.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna show, Varun. So here is where you will be just binding to the event listener. This event listener you have not assigned to a particular element. You're just, what you did is you created a variable for event listener. You created a function and then you binded that function to an event listener variable, but you haven't used this event listener variable to assign it to a particular element. You see these are the elements and you have not assigned to any particular event. So to add that variable to an event listener, you have to, and I'm going to add it to the text box, right? So element text box dot add event listener is the function that you should be using. And then here you would, again, based on the element, you have particular functions available. So if you're doing a text box, then you would have on change, like change event. So you would have change like this, change, right? Or key up or key down. But these functions won't be available if the element is of type div. So div tag will have a different set of um, events, right? So I'm going to use key up for now. And then I'm going to say, OK, I have the key up event. What do I want to do with it? So I want to trigger this event change event listener. So what we're defining here is whenever there's a key up event fired, call this event listener. This event listener in turn calls this on change function. That's what it does here. Now this event, if I remove it, it actually will throw an error later on. It doesn't show me an error over here, but shows the error later on. So it passes this event for that on change. Okay. On change is wrong. That's why. This dot this missing. This dot on change. Yeah. So now if I move this, doesn't show an error, but yeah, it does. It does throw an error though when you actually run the code. Any questions on the event listener part? Okay, so now we have done all the changes. The UI is ready. The event is ready. Now, when we go back to the tool, you will see there's a test button over here. Okay, so you click on the test button. It again does this npm start watch is the command. Now there are two commands for testing. There's a npm start and npm start watch. The difference is if you're using npm start, and I'll show you the difference as well. Let me just bring this over here. So now this is default. Why doesn't it show? Oh. Yeah, the CSS is missing. That's why. Okay, so now here's the thing. Now I'll show you how that watch works. So this watch is pretty neat. What it's doing is whenever there are changes in the code. So let me go back to the code. Whenever there are changes in the code, it will do a real-time update to the code. So CSS. And I'm going to paste some CSS file. Now, because I'm including my CSS file, I'm going to go to my manifest file and then update the CSS. So my CSS is included over here. Now, as soon as I save this, let me save it. You'll see that there would be changes. So it detected a change. It detected that this file got added, and then it created this bundle.js. It recreated this bundle.js because it had created that bundle.js here, and then it recreated bundle.js over here. If I go back to my folder, I mean, on my PCF control sandbox testing environment, you would see that it changed, right? But why is it not showing? Oh, there you go. It was just not showing because it was hidden. But you can see that it's counting the characters, it's counting the words because those events are getting hit. Okay, but that data is not getting written. That data is not been set as the output yet. So let's see how it works. So let's go stop this. Let's go to tool, and the only thing that because we have initiated this test with watch, this particular console keeps on reading for the changes even if we have closed the browser, because it cannot detect the browser is closed or not. So because it's still detecting the changes, we should hit the terminate running processes button over here, which terminates the button. Now we can deploy this without a solution file. To deploy this without a solution file, we have to create this authentication profile, which I have already created. We are going to look at this later on, but just to save time, because we have only 3 minutes left, I'm going to deploy this to my testing environment. And it takes a little time.
Danish, while it's deploying, you mind explaining what does deploy without solution file means?
Yeah, I'm going to cover it because it's a very lengthy subject to cover.
Okay.
But basically, you don't need a solution file to deploy. This is for a quick testing purposes. Like you want to test something pretty quick, you deploy it without creating the CDS. CDS project is what I talked about earlier, right? There are two kind of projects: PCF project and then CDS project. PCF project is your custom control project, and then CDS project is your solution management project, right? So deploy without solution file is where you're not actually creating the CDS project, but deploying this without creating the CDS project. This is only for testing purposes. This should not be used to deploy the component to your dev environment without creating a solution. So the regular or the recommended way is to go with the solution file, but this is just for like a quick test. So once the quick test is done, just delete the control, and then once your control is ready to be deployed in the dev environment to be pushed to UAT or other instances, then you go with the solution regular solution deployment process. Okay, so let's go to CRM.
So when you say deploy without solution file, it's basically just putting it into the default solution, right?
It's not, it's actually creating a solution, but it's a test solution, which
Okay,
is unmanaged.
got it.
I'll show you where it creates that right now. So as you can see, it does this. So it's doing a solution import. It actually created a solution file, a temporary solution file. It then created a solution import, and then it did a lot of other stuff, and then it customized the solution as well. So now if you're going back, back to your settings page, so if you go to your solutions, oh, I'm on the wrong solution. Yeah, it overwrote one of my other control. Damn. Yeah, so here is it. Here character counter demo. So character counter demo is the this is the test solution that it creates with this Power Apps tool, and then when I deployed it, I gave this prefix as PM test. So that is what it gives here. So Power Apps tools underscore PM test, and then if I go here, I can see that my control is present over here. Now I can go and edit. So let me add existing entity account. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the form. I have to go to the classic UI, but main form. Let me go to the classic one. And then I'm going to change. Do I have description? Yeah, this is the description. So I'm going to change this description to use my control. Add character counter. This is what we gave for a display name, and you can see the types appeared over here as well, whatever we gave, right? So now if I add this, I can see the description actually auto, it just bind itself, right? Because that's what we said. The first thing is to bind the parameter. Now here is the character limit which is not required, and then it has this configure property button. You see that it gives us the text box, and then it has this data type of whole number. So it will only accept whole number. But let's say you have a property as well in CRM stored on your on your entity. You can always bind it, but then bind would only show you the whole numbers from that entity. Now we are going to keep it for 200. We haven't used that in our code though.
So when we bind it in that case, will it write it back to CE?
So this, no, it's not gonna. So remember how I showed you what the outputs were. So in the generated manifest file, character limit is never in the output. Only things that have the usage type as bound would return back to CRM. Otherwise, they won't return back to CRM. They would be used only as input. The usage is input. It would only be used as input, not as output.
Okay.
Okay. So that's why this character limit will never be sent back to CRM, even if you use this bind property. It's not going to be sent to CRM. Now let's do this. Save it and publish it. Come on. Okay, and let's go and open our account form. Now account form, it's on details. Okay? Yeah, it was on details. Now if you start typing, oh, but to do one thing. I did description. It's on details. Yeah, there you go. So as you can see, the label came here. Now I'm going to save this record. Okay, so saved. I'm going to refresh it, and I have autosave on. Autosave is also switched on this instance. Go to details. I don't see the record. I don't see the data that I inputted. The reason is because in our code we are not returning that data back to CRM. In here, get outputs is returning nothing. We have to make sure that we are returning the data back to CRM using the get outputs method. And the get outputs method will be invoked through this notify output change. So if the notify output change is invoked, because you can even create this as a state. You can create a state or you can create a variable and then return that variable in the get outputs. So you don't need to invoke this notify output change. You can leave it as is. There are other ways as well, but because we are using this notify changed, I'm going to show you how it works. So now in get outputs, when you do a control space, you would see all the options, right? You would see that input text is auto appearing here. And then here is where you would give the value. So the value would be from my input from my text box dot value. This is what is going to be returned back to CRM. Now, once we go and build our control, now we have to build again because we did some changes, right? So we are building our control and something happened over here. Any questions while it's building?
So if you are not returning anything, that means even if I have on change registered, it would not trigger because you are not returning anything.
Right. So before we deploy it, I'm going to show you one more time, right? See here, there's no unsafe changes here, right?
Yep.
Whenever I'm changing anything, the unsafe changes appear over
Yep.
here. Now once
Yep.
you save it, the unsafe changes goes away. But
Yep.
because we don't have that get outputs configured, no matter how much I type here, unsafe changes will never appear here because the data is not returning back to CRM.
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so let me refresh this. Let's go back. It succeeded, and let's deploy it.
So Danish, when you start returning, it's actually writing it back to the description property because that's the
Right.
property that you are binding to the
Right.
control.
Yeah. Then that's how the on change of that particular attribute would also get fired in CRM if there is any function written on it. If you're not returning anything back, then the on change event will not get triggered in CRM as well.
Danish, when does that control go away? When you close, log out of the CRM, does it disappear then, or?
What do you mean?
Well, you're deploying without a solution file, right? So does that control stay there, or does it disappear once you remove it from the screen?
So if you delete the solution, so if you go back to the solution, come on. Let me hide this. So it depends on what type of solution. So I've not deployed it using solution yet. I've deployed it using without solution, remember? So I've selected this deploy without solution file. So whenever I'm deploying without solution file, it does create a temporary solution. Now in this, because it's an unmanaged solution and these controls are unmanaged, deleting the solution won't remove it from the system. You can remove it from the form. So you can always go here and then say, okay, I don't want this control anymore. I'm going to go here and control, and then I'm just going to remove it from web. It's no longer going to appear on account form, but the control is going to be in the system until and unless you delete it. So until and unless you go here and then say, I don't want this control anymore, and then you say remove and delete from this environment, it's going to stay there. Now, if you have any dependencies, like I've used it on account form, it's not going to let you delete it unless until you remove it from the form first. So if I try to delete it, oh, it deleted. Well, it shouldn't. It should tell me that there is dependency. That's a bug.
Did you
That's
say? Did you
No,
save it when you
but you
just shut down the account?
unselected. Yeah, unselected, right? From the web on the
no,
form.
I didn't publish my changes though.
You did
Yeah.
not even save them. Yep.
Yeah, I didn't even save it. So it shouldn't, there's a bug which should be reported to Microsoft for sure. But yeah, it shouldn't remove it unless until you remove all the dependencies. Did I answer your question, Robert?
Yes.
Let me deploy this again. Yeah. Let's wait till it. Okay, so it seems like it deployed. Let me see if it's available here again. Nope.
It's part of Power App solution, right? Not the CRM solution.
There's no CRM. Power Apps and CRM is all like there's no CRM solution of Power Apps. There are not two different things. There's only one solution. Solution is Power Platform solution.
Oh, okay, got it.
It's failing or what? I think it's failing. Okay, yeah. Could not be found. Yeah, this happens from time to time. This control manifest file could not be found. It says, and let's build it one more time. This happens with this command. I've seen this couple of times happening. Rebuilding and trying to deploy it again fixes the issue. Sorry, we are way over time. So if anyone wants to drop off, feel free.
That's all right, Danish.
We are almost there.
Danish, I have a suggestion for the tool. I mean, deploy without solution, it's confusing, I feel like. So, I mean, pretty much I can guess that from the questions that are coming around it. So I think you can relabel it to deploy with temporary solution rather than calling it deploy without solution. While
Sure.
at the end of the day, it is deploying with a solution, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You can just call it deploy using temp solution or something.
I was actually gonna do a like they call it push.
Yep. Yeah, just push. Yeah.
So this is the command that, oh, I forgot to tell you that this is the command that we use for deploy using push is pack PCF push and then the publisher prefix.
So what I understand deploy without solution file is, because I've been working with this quite a bit, is it seems like you're not actually creating the solution file on your local system. You're skipping that part, because I was creating the solution on my computer. I was creating a folder, and then running the PAC command, init solution, and then I was importing it manually into.
Right.
So this skips all that and just goes directly from. It just saves like so much time.
Right.
Because
And
it takes so much longer to do it the manual way and import it, and then you have to publish it, and it takes forever. This is like 1, 2, 3.
right. And this is what the steps that Robert is explaining is what I've described over here. So you have to first create a solution, then add a component to the solution, then build it, which creates the zip file, and then deploy it using this deploy button. Whereas this one is one click, but Robert and to others, it does create a zip file. So if you look at the steps here, what it does is, okay, dropping a temporary solution wrapper zip file, then it goes and creates a zip file for that particular solution. It does the same steps. It does create a zip file, but this is a temporary zip file that it creates. Now, this step is only for the developers to test their control. Once you have tested the control, you have to follow these steps to create an actual solution file, and then use that as your deployment in your deployment process. To not use this temporary solution, because it always will have this Power App tools in its name. So this is only for the testing purposes. Quick test. I use it only for quick test. Once I've tested my control, I'll go make sure that I'm deleting the solution, deleting the control, and then following the same steps by creating a solution, then adding the component to the solution, building it, and then deploying it. But yeah, it does save time because it's a quick test. So now my control is here. I need to go back to my form. The strange thing is it was able to delete it without removing the dependency. So going back to the description field, let's go back to the description field, add. Oh, that's strange. And then publish it.
Anish, while it's publishing, the control that you just imported with the temporary solution file, what's the type of it? What would be the type that appears as it is in the solution?
What do you mean? What do you mean by type?
Can you open the solution where the control got imported?
Yeah. The type is custom control.
Custom control. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a new component that was added. So if you go to add existing component, you can see these are all the components, right? So one of the component is custom control. You will also see custom connector over here.
So
these are all the new so the new components that got added was this component library, which is the Canvas apps component library, custom connector, custom control, export to data lake config is a new component that got added. So
okay.
Yeah. And then environment variables is also a new component that got added recently. So yeah, going back here, let's go to details. And there's a description. Now we have that output method selected, right? So now if we start typing, you should see unsafe changes appears over here, and then you save it. And then you reload the page and then go to that description field. You should see that data persist. So go to details. And the data persisted, and then it's showing on the control. Now, the reason why it's showing on the control is, as you remember, when we did the init method, we had this value captured from here, from this raw, and then show on the input text box. Now, if we don't do this step, even though the data exists in CRM, it won't show up on your control. So to show up on the control, you have to make sure that you're capturing the data on the init method and then assigning it to the appropriate elements. Okay. Any questions?
I'm good.
Okay. Well, the only thing that
So
I was not able to touch today was the update view, but it works in the similar fashion. The update view is invoked whenever the value changes. So if you change the value of the text box or the property bag, like if the value of the property itself is changing or the height and width is changing, then the update view gets invoked. We would be using this in the React especially. So you would see it how we would handle update view in the coming sessions.
okay, Danish, question. So the temporary solution generation, is that something that you are controlling in the code, or is that something the platform itself generates while creating the custom control?
So yeah, platform is doing it. The idea of the tool was to use whatever is whatever the PCF whatever the framework gives us. So there's a command in the framework called as pack PCF push, which makes this happen. So this is the command.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is.
Danish, I have a question. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just wondering if if it doesn't bind to a solution. I was thinking maybe we can just add it to an existing solution and add it as part of custom control, just like we do when we do an add existing, right? So that possibility doesn't exist here then?
It does not, but you can add. So you can add you can add a control to an existing solution. Right now the tool doesn't support it, but you can use a command prompt to make that happen. Whenever you create a new control, the only thing is you have to make sure that all your components and the solution prefixes are same. Like whenever you have this control, and then this control was deployed using XYZ prefix, and the other control was deployed as XYZ prefix, those can be included in one single solution.
Okay.
Yeah, the prefix should be same. So that is what Sudhakar was talking about previously, which we are going to see in the deployment strategies when we are going to hit that session.
Okay.
We'll go in details.
Great. Thanks, Danish.
Any other questions?
So, actually, I have two, Danish. Real quick, where would you debug this, right? If you are building a PCF component. So we saw that first you tested it outside Dynamics and then you actually pushed it to Dynamics. Where would you be debugging in order to test it?
Yeah, so I wanted to actually touch that, but because we were running out of time, normally what you do is when you do this test, right? You hit the test, and then that. So once I do this test, the PCF control sandbox instance opens up, right? The once it loads, I'll show you.
Like in your local web browser, and you would just use the F12
Right.
developer tools.
Yes. Yeah. So it's compiling. Come on.
And while it's doing that, what if I have to interact with, the other components that are going to be there in the Dynamics form? So there are other components on the Dynamics form. Maybe let's assume I change the text here. I want same text to be populated on another text field or whatever. I'm just being hypothetical, right?
Right.
So does the liability of that remains on the onChange function on the dynamic side, or can I interact with the other components of the form
You
within my
cannot. So
components?
you cannot actually interact with the other components of the form unless until those are binded as a property. So you cannot
Okay.
use xrm dot or xrm dot page or form context. You cannot use
Mm-hmm.
those, right?
Okay.
The only thing that you can do is use them as a property, and then if you have them as a property, say I'm going to change it right here, then it would change over here. It's not changing, but yeah. It doesn't do it right here, but yeah, this is where you'll get the outputs, right? But these are the only things that you can do in the testing framework. You can always check for responsiveness. You can do this. Then you see that it's responsive. You can test this responsiveness. You can test the property input, property output. You can do those. You can also check if how it would look on phone or how it would look on web. You can do those things, but you cannot really interact with the other components of CRM. You cannot do that in the control anyways, because if it is not binded as a property, then you won't be able to get those values. And you can use xrm.page, but it is not the recommended way.
Dani, sorry, I missed the part. How did you get the local host up and running, and how did you get to the screen to test?
So you just click on this test button, which invokes this framework test environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's one control per field, right? Or can we create a component? This and add multiple text box and bind it with multiple attributes on the form.
You cannot do that right now. That was one of the question Varun had. Can we create composite components? Right now, you cannot create composite components. It's one component for one field. What you could do is you could have multiple text boxes, but then you have to bind it to one single attribute.
Okay.
So
Can I not do window.parent in this?
you could, but it's not recommended.
Yeah. Also, last time as I remember, last time you told that you saw people using xrm.page.get attribute. So where did
Yes.
they use? Where did they did that?
Well,
In
you
the
can
in the
ask.
index.ts?
Yes, in the index.ts, you can use xrm.page, but again, it's not recommended.
Yeah.
You have to use the context, because context gives you all the things that you would interact with. So context also gives you context dot web API. You can get the
Okay.
invoke web API. You can get user settings. You can do navigation, like if you want to open up a form,
Mhm.
a create form or a contact form or whatever forms, you can do that. You can check for client, you can check for devices, so you can do certain things, but you have to be you have to keep uh, working with this context itself. As I said, you can use page, but I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay.
So in
Thank
terms
you.
of properties, you have many properties, but the binding or the data that you get for is just one attribute to which the control is
No,
binded.
no, you can bind to multiple attributes. So you can have a property here, say this property, and then the input text 2 and input text 3, and then you can have bound on all this, right? You can get the data from multiple. You can get the data from multiple attributes, but then only one single attribute will be replaced on the UI. That's why I
But
said it.
how do you get that? Because if you go to your index.ts, uh, there is just one property from which you are getting the raw value.
So
So
mhm.
when you on the CRM form when you add this control, can you select multiple attributes there?
Yes. So just to save time, I'm going to show you one from that I already built.
Hmm.
Um, no, text, text analytics. So here is the one that I have built. Now this is only connecting with one single attribute. That attribute is the description field. But as you can see, I'm also showing a flip switch. I'm also tagging it to, so I'm these are all CRM attributes. Detect language is a CRM flip switch. Identify key phrase is a CRM attribute. 1, 2, 3, and then this description is 4 attributes. My control has been binded to um, four attributes in CRM, but then I'm only replacing one of the attribute, that is the description. So on the UI,
Oh, so
I replace description to show in this manner, and then these are the actual regular flip switches.
okay.
So the
Get it.
inputs
So
can be multiple, but the
you
output, the return output is always going to be one.
One,
yeah,
yes,
because you're returning one, right? You cannot directly access the property. Is that correct,
right,
Dani?
right,
Okay, got it now.
yeah, yeah. Any other questions?
Danish, I have one question.
Mhm.
If you can go back to the form where you have hooked the control to.
Mhm.
Okay, now this control is hooked into description field. Suppose if I have to do some validation based on the value on one of the other fields, say suppose based on a phone number or something, how will be I able to access the phone number without using xrm.page?
Yeah, so then you'll have to have two properties as I described
Okay.
earlier, and then you'd have to bind those phone number
Mm-hmm.
to another property, but then you would replace description with the control that you're trying to develop.
So the phone number will be the input property, right? Of type input usage.
Right. Yes. No, not input. It would still be
Okay.
binded. So you can have phone number here,
Mm-hmm.
and then your input type would be mm, single line text. There's
Mm-hmm.
a single line phone as well,
Uh,
and then
mhm.
group will be so of type single line phone, and usage will still be bound.
Assume I don't want to bind the control to phone number.
Mm-hmm.
I'll still bind the control to the description field.
No, so you have the description. So let's take this as an example so that it clears everything, right? So I'm gonna do a build. I'm not gonna use it. I just wanted to
Okay.
show that as a property. So I'm not using it in the code, but in this
Mm-hmm.
manifest file, I have two properties. One is for input text and one is for phone number. Both of them
Okay.
has properties as bound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
And while you are doing that, Danish, if we go and do it this way, where we are binding it to more than one attribute, uh, we might not be able to use it at multiple places, and right, because then it's becoming very, very restrictive or very specific to certain scenario, right?
Not necessarily. Why
Because
why do
if
you
you're
think it would become more restrictive?
because now you have specified that your PCF component needs two properties binded to it.
You can keep it optional, and then you
Yeah,
can
but
handle it in the code. It
again,
all
you are
depends
building.
how. There's no like straight rule that you cannot do it. It's flexible. So if you want to, you can handle it in the code, and then you can do some null checks and then work with that. So it's all based on how you're designing your control.
But then we are getting into specific requirements, right? I mean, that's what we discussed in the previous session. That it's more about the reusability of components, right? Wherein you build it once, then you are able to use it at multiple places without.
I have my control binded to 4 fields, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Not necessarily I can reuse it on multiple places. I can still reuse it on multiple places, on multiple forms, on multiple entities. It would just need those data types, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can bind it to anything, but it would just need those data types. That is what the idea is.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh, Come on, this is failing. Yeah, but as I said, like whatever controls are out there today, most of them are most of them have more than two property binded to them. Where did it fail? If this doesn't work, then I'll show you in the next session because we're way over time today.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, finally, yeah, it worked. Okay, come on. Okay, so let's go and refresh the form first where it is been used. Now let's go to description, change properties, and then go to control. And here you can see there's a, now because I just copy pasted it, I still have the display name as input text. But if I click here, it would only give me the single line phone field, and I can still bind it to multiple fields. So I can get inputs from description and I can get inputs from telephone one.
So right now we have both as a bound, right?
Yes, both as a bound.
And
But what I'm doing is I'm
but it will
replacing. See, I'm
okay.
replacing the description with this control.
Okay. So if you change value in telephone, it's going to put it into description.
Well, I've not. No, it's not. So this is a different property. This is a different property. This is a phone number property. So if I go to index file, I should receive here, let phone number of type number is equal to the context dot parameters dot phone number dot raw. Right. So this is a different thing. This is altogether totally different.
And how does it know that which of the property is binded to phone number and which one is binding to input text?
Well, this is this input is actually my mistake, right? The display name is input text
Got it.
because I copy pasted it with the same thing, but this should have been phone number, right? So this would have, if this was phone number, I would have seen phone number over here, right? So this
Right.
was binded to a phone number parameter. This is binded to a description parameter. So I'm getting two different things over here, two different values.
Yep. Yep. Then it's
Right?
clear. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of input that you are passing phone number from the CRM form to the control.
Right. Think of this as a function, right? If you're writing a function and if you want multiple parameters, then these are the multiple parameters, right?
Yeah, means
But then the
instead.
output function always returns one single output, correct? So this is
Okay.
returning one single output, and then you're just changing the description to bind it to this particular control.
Okay, so first property it will take means whatever input text required to description where you gave, that will work, and other will act as a just input parameters.
Right.
Passing data from form to PCF control.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we are way over time. Thank you guys for staying so late.
All right, Danish. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Danish. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Danish.
Thanks, Dinesh.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.